With DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it really is death by 1,000 paper cuts, isn't it? Nothing happens in a vacuum on this planet. The tragedy in New Orleans did not happen randomly. Islamic terrorism has been the most deadly form of terrorism in this country since 9/11, but the current administration chose to look away. What happened on Bourbon Street on Wednesday happened through sheer negligence. So when does the DEI come in? Well, if the FBI was really focused on hiring the best and the brightest, the most qualified, the best people for the job and not the most ethnic or the most female or the most diverse, the radicalization of Sansu Sinzabar would have been spotted months ago, and perhaps this is prevented. And I'm not speculating. If Joe Biden's FBI was interested in finding potential Islamic terrorists in this country, they'd find them. If the Secret Service was really interested in protecting Donald Trump from that 20-year-old weirdo, he's probably not able to get anywhere near that roof with an AR-15. But let's be honest, they weren't interested in protecting Donald Trump. If Trump got killed in July, it would be a national tragedy for half the country. For the other half, oops, oh well. Does that mean J.D. Vance is the candidate now? It brings me no joy to say that. But that's the truth. That's how it feels. If the FBI was interested in finding people like Sansu Sinzabar, they would have found him. If Mark Zuckerberg was really interested in the well-being of an entire population addicted to his product, a system would already be in place where as soon as someone posts something ISIS-related, the authorities closest to that person's URL would be notified immediately. These are not lofty expectations from a great criminal justice mind. This is all just common sense. And how do you expect these agencies to act? How do you expect them to be run when the head of the snake says things like this just last year?
To stand up against the poison of white supremacy, as I did in my inaugural address, to single out as the most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy.
Sadly, the DEI doesn't stop there. I wish it did, but it runs all the way down the line to the chief of police down there in New Orleans, a woman that was hired in the bluest city in a very red state, not based on her qualifications for the job, but based on things that none of us can control, things like gender. And that decision by the city council in New Orleans last year probably cost lives on New Year's Eve. If barriers were up on Bourbon Street, this does not happen. We've gone over that. Sansu Sinzabar would still have driven his rented truck into a crowd somewhere, but maybe it doesn't happen right there, and maybe 15 people don't die. And I mention this because Kirkpatrick, who somehow still has a job, apparently had no idea that the barriers that were just conveniently reinstalled on Bourbon Street were fully available to the police force if they wanted to use them, but they weren't used because this carpetbagger of a police chief, who's not even from New Orleans, didn't even know they were there to use. She didn't know they existed. And we know that because she told us that. Take a look.
Chief, where did those archers come from?
Sorry?
Those yellow archers, where did they come from?
Actually, we have them. I didn't know about them, but we have them. And so we have been able now to put them out.
So this is where we are today. 14 people are dead. 30 people are in the hospital because she didn't know the barriers were available. And that right there is DEI. In the 15th century, a method of torture was used called Chinese water torture. DEI by another name. The process involved dripping water onto someone's forehead over a prolonged period of time to try and elicit a confession. It could last for days at a time, weeks even. At first, the process might not seem that bad or sound bad. Why would someone mind if they had water dripped on their forehead? That's not a big deal. But if you do it for hours or days, it drove people insane. And that's what's happening. That's DEI. This slow Chinese water torture and watering down of our local and federal agencies and our whole culture. It's the FBI worrying more about things that don't matter instead of focusing on things that do. It's the city of New Orleans hiring a woman for a job who's not qualified to do that job. It's the president of the United States picking a woman as his running mate based on skin color and gender. Yes, you, Kamala, and not based on what's best for America. That same woman once again reminded us all today why America didn't choose her in November.
Join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the...
What you just witnessed is a 60-year-old woman who also happens to still be our sitting vice president. who didn't know the Pledge of Allegiance by heart. That is DEI by Chinese water torture. I also thought this was worth mentioning tonight. 24 years after 9/11, and the pride that people have in this country has changed completely. 2 days after planes brought down the Twin Towers, this was the scene in New York City.
I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
That was New York City after 9/11. 2 days after 9/11, America came together, and that was the scene in Lower Manhattan. Islamic terrorists killed 15 people in New Orleans on Wednesday. Tell me if you notice a difference here.
And we're sending you back to Europe. You white. Go back to Europe. Go back to Europe.
We are proud to be in this struggle. We know who our enemies are. We know who we're fighting against.
The change in this country is remarkable, and it's all by design. The slow normalization of things that are not normal. The Chinese water torture of an entire population. The slow drip, drip, drip that maybe ISIS isn't so bad. And maybe there should be a place for Islamic extremism in this country. And that maybe those protesters are somehow normal. They are not. It is not. And if it doesn't stop, America will.